Environment, social and governance. These three letters make ESG. ESG framework is the focus of the talk of this week. We have talked about what is ESG, how is ESG connected to the social innovations, how is technology the part of the ESG framework reporting, what are ESG standards, what are ESG frameworks, and raters and rankers, what do they do. In this lecture, I would like to talk about the ESG gap analysis and carbon crediting. What is ESG gap analysis? Significance of ESG gap analysis, process of the ESG gap analysis, then carbon crediting in India and certain challenges faced by carbon crediting. These will be covered in this lecture. What is ESG gap analysis? ESG gap analysis is a process of comparing an organization's current ESG performance to its desired performance. It can be used to identify areas where organization is doing well and areas where it needs to improve. That is, which are the weak points, which are the strong points. It is a kind of the SWOT analysis, not of a person, but of a company, because it is ESG gap analysis. It is involving environment, it is involving social, it is involving governance, a lot of data and a wide range of the stakeholders are there. So, that is why it came as a separate concept to be talked about. ESG gap analysis can also be used to demonstrate to investors and other stakeholders that the organization is committed to ESG and that it is taking steps to improve its performance. ESG gap can be valuable tool for organization of all sizes. It can help organizations to identify their ESG strengths and weaknesses, set realistic ESG goals, develop a plan to improve their ESG performance, then track their progress over time, communicate their ESG performance to the stakeholders. That is, they keep a full track of what ESG is doing and they also try to keep it reporting to the investors or the people who are the major stakeholders of the company. So, there is a step by step procedure or process of ESG gap analysis to identify key ESG priorities and information gaps. The certain steps are: rank ESG topics for disclosure by order of importance. Step 2 is we note down the gaps and overlaps in my strategy. Then we rephrase the metrics and actions as per the requirements. Then we build our ESG action plan. Let us see the step 1, that is ranking of the ESG topics for disclosure by order of importance. So, we need to jot down all the ESG topics which are relevant to our business and we may be required to report on and rank them in order of importance. For example, the order of importance based upon the environmental factors, social factors and governance factors. The highest order is given to energy management, supply chain management and compensation policy, and the lowest order is given to environmental policies. Here the lowest order is given to workforce development. Here for the governance, the lowest importance is given to the risk assessment. Depending upon the company's goals, these orders ranking could be different. For instance, for social, one company is putting an order as supply chain management order 1, diversity, equity and inclusions order 2, health and safety order 3, stakeholder engagement as order 4 and workforce development as order 5. There could be swap between the order 3 and 4 for a different company, like stakeholder engagement could go as a third order of priority and health and safety might come down as a fourth order of priority depending upon the company's own strategy to identify the gap. This is also helpful to make note of topics where you would have already made significant progress and the ones which may require a bit more attention going forward. Then is step 2, that is we note the gaps and overlaps in our strategy. In the example below, we have taken our top environmental topics from step 1, that is energy management, and provided example of relevant disclosures and frameworks and the key performance metrics that each encompasses. For instance, metric is energy consumption data coverage as a percentage of floor area by property subsector. Here you can see which of the frameworks are connected, because we are talking about the consumption data coverage. So, CDP is connected, DJSI is connected, wherever it is connected we are putting crosses here. So, all the frameworks which are being used are connected here. Let me take an example of the 4th metric here, that is the amount of the reductions in energy consumption achieved as direct result of conservation and efficiency initiatives. It is a result of conservation, energy conservation. CDP is connected, DJSI is not connected, here SASB is not connected. So, we are connecting, we have data for which kind of the framework here. So, that is how we are trying to see the key performance metrics of our present status of the specific kind of the strategy that we have. Then if we rephrase the metrics as actions, rephrase each performance metric as a high level actions by tacking an action verb onto the beginning. In our continuing energy management example, let us assume that we now decide we want to focus on GRESB and CDP only. Here is what our list of action steps might look like. You see the first word it is say by an action verb. So, this is the action verb, collect energy consumption and calculate data coverage as percentage of floor area by a property subsector. Second action, calculate total portfolio energy consumption and coverage, differentiate grid versus renewable energy and calculate total percentages of renewable versus grid energy consumption. Renewable means that is the green energy, grid energy means that is coming from the regular power supply. Then we isolate, then we identify, then again we identify. You can see the factors which are given here or the actions which are given here, having starting point of the first word are the action verbs, collect, calculate, isolate, identify. The last one is identify all energy efficiency measures at each building in the portfolio implemented in the last 3 years. So, this is what is to be collected. So, this is rephrasing the metrics as actions. Then we need to build our ESG action plan. So, with all this information in hand, we return to our ESG priorities and gap analysis and work backwards. That is, we make informed decisions now about which steps we can realistically take to arrive at our desired outcomes. It is which steps we are taking. So, by when, that is timeline. Then we are to be little clear with which kind of the framework we are trying to talk about. We are talking about CDP and also we are talking about GRESB. Then we are talking about the specific performance metric, that is we are talking about energy. So, we build our ESG action plan accordingly and try to choose the right framework, that is CDP and GRESB were chosen. The example that is taken is close to the place Amsterdam. So, GRESB is a framework which is based upon an organization based in Amsterdam, Netherlands. So, that is why this framework was taken, the example that is taken here. Next comes carbon credits. Carbon credits are tradable certificates representing a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, typically equivalent to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide or its equivalent in other greenhouse gases. The purpose of carbon credits, incentivizing and rewarding combating climate change. When I say incentivizing and rewarding, that means we try to reduce and remove greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere. When I say combating climate change, we are trying to encourage businesses and individuals to take some actions to mitigate their carbon footprint. A permit that allows the holder to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide, that is carbon credit, projects that prevent emission of greenhouse or remove the greenhouse from the atmosphere on these credits, which can in turn can be sold to other businesses and individuals to offset the emission they make. That is, 1 carbon credit is equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide emission. So, carbon credits are given to the people who have saved 1 ton of the carbon dioxide emission. There is a protocol regarding carbon credits which is known as Kyoto Protocol, which was developed by UNFCCC, that is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, aimed at fighting global warming. Goal was to see participants collectively reduce emissions of GHG by 5.2% below the emission levels of 1990 by 2012. If participants continue with emissions above the targets by the Kyoto Protocol, then they are required to engage in emission trading, that is buying credits from other participant countries. This was just an endeavor to motivate or promote the participants to work towards the environmental mitigations. US and Australia have not signed the Kyoto Protocol. So, this was UNFCCC Kyoto Protocol, in which alliance based and project based systems were there. In the alliance based systems, international emission trading between developed countries were there. In the project based systems, clean development mechanisms, that is developing and developed countries were both participated in it. Then joint implementation between developed countries was there. So, in the alliance based system, AAU, assigned amount units, was the carbon credit units. Then in the project based systems, the carbon reduction units, that is CER, were the one, and ERU, that is the emissions reduction units, were the other which were taken. The clean development mechanism, this is a part of Kyoto Protocol. The purpose of clean development mechanism is to reduce emission and contribute to sustainable development in developing countries. Under the UNFCCC charter, any developed country can tie up with a company in developing country that is signatory to Kyoto Protocol. Companies in developing countries must adopt new technologies emitting lesser gas and save energy. Only a portion of total earning of carbon credits can be transferred to a company in developed countries under the clean development mechanisms. There are certain challenges that India is facing in carbon credits. It is, even though India is the second largest generator of environmentally friendly projects for reduction of carbon emission, Indian companies hesitate to generate monetary benefits through trade. Indian companies are holding on their CERs because they feel they would fetch them better prices later. Lack of interest in future contracts is also primarily due to small size of most projects. Since carbon emissions from small companies and comparatively low companies are not really depending upon their incentive to upgrade themselves. To summarize this week, I have just put the 17 SDGs. As I said, I will talk about United Nations SDGs, that is Sustainable Development Goals, in the end of this lecture. Now, this is now divided into 3 parts: E, S, G. These are not order wise. You can see, because they were Sustainable Development Goals, so society was the first priority. Because we are talking about ESG, I have put environment first. So, the goal regarding environment, that is goal 6, that is clean water and sanitation, which ensures the availability of sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. So, this is the goal given in the environment. Then the goal 7 is affordable and clean energy, which means the energy should be accessible, should be reliable, should be modern energy for all. Then we have goal 9 here, that is industry, innovation and infrastructure. That means there has to be resilient industry infrastructure, which has to have inclusive promotion of the society, and sustainable system has to be there. Then goal 11 is there, that is sustainable cities and communities, which make cities and humans to have a safe and sustainable environment. Then we have goal 12, which is responsible consumption and production. which means these goals ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Then goal 13, which is climate action, that is urgent actions to combat the climate change and its impacts. Goal 14 and 15 are there, which are talking about the below water life and life on land. The goal 14 talk about the below water life, that in the ocean, seas, marine resources, how the sustainable development could happen in them. Then life on land, that is to protect and promote sustainable ecosystems, that is to manage forest, to reverse the land gradation and to halt the biodiversity loss. These are all part of the environment. Then comes the social goals. The first and the foremost goal which was laid in the SDGs is no poverty, that is end poverty in all its forms and from everywhere. Then also we need to end hunger, that is zero hunger, that is completely end hunger and achieve food security at each and every part of the world. Then we have good health and well-being, that is to ensure healthy livelihood for everyone and for all ages. Then we have quality education, that is ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Then is goal 5, gender equality should be there, clean water and sanitation. Then decent work and economic growth. Decent work means people should be employable, there should be productive employment for them, there should be decent work for all. Then goal 9 is also mentioned in social as well. So, that is in goal 9 which was mentioned in environment, because goal 9 is talking about industry, innovation and infrastructure, and when we are talking about industry, employment also becomes a part of it, inclusivity also becomes a part of it. So, that becomes a social endeavor as well. Then comes the goal 10, that is reduced inequalities, that is gender inequality, race inequality, inequalities among countries, that is also be reduced. Then goal 12 again comes here, that is responsible consumption and production. Then comes goal 16 here, which is one of the very important goals, and it talks about peace, justice and strong institutions, institutions that helps us to actually implement or actually practice all the goals of SDGs. Then comes the governance goals. Gender equality is part of the governance, decent work and economic growth is the part of the governance, industry, innovation and infrastructure is part of it. Then we have goal 11 here, that is sustainable cities and communities, the responsible consumption and production is part of it, climate action, that is goal 13, which is climate action, that is take urgent action to combat the climate change and impacts. Then peace, justice and strong institutions, and the goal 17, that is partnership for the goals, which is focused on strengthening the means of implementation of the global partnership for the overall sustainable development. So, here we can see the SDGs which are talking about peace and prosperity globally, and is an urgent call for all the countries. United Nations has laid down all of these, and these could also be divided into the ESG. The ESG, that is the social innovation, is a part of it, and we are trying to talk about the UN SDG 17 goals which are aligned in the different sectors of the ESG, that is environment, social and governance. So, with this week 11 is completed, we will meet in week 12 where Professor Ram Kumar will talk about marketing in social innovation. Thank you.